Good afternoon. This is the afternoon before Shabbos tonight. There's Nota Feinstein with Hasidic Nurse's Notes, installation of that. I'm a registered nurse in Florida, New York, worked in other states, and I'm a Hasidic Jew, but I'm not a rabbi, but I'm sort of an amateur, so maybe I can relate to the amateurs out there and give you some information which I've accumulated over the years through learning and working. So today is the 15th of the month of May and the 28th of the Hebrew month of Iyar. And the next month is called Sivan, and the 6th of Sivan is the holiday of Shavuos, or may be known as the Feast of Weeks. It's 7 weeks counting from Passover to Shavuos, which is a mitzvah in the Torah that we're supposed to count these days. And we also celebrate that this was the day of the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai to the Jewish people, and I guess the revelation of Hashem at that time in front of at least 2 million people. So getting on with that, the giving of the Torah, if you're looking in the Torah passages, you won't find that said explicitly. It's calculated, and that's why we celebrate it like a full holiday, where we don't work, do creative activities, among other things. So with that in mind, I'm going to give the brief introduction that I usually give, that we're here because of God, the creator, sustainer of the universe, and who has created this world in its entirety. And everything is within him, nothing's outside of him. And he actually generates everything, all occurrences, except he gives us human beings, mankind, the opportunity to partner with him to actually make the world perfect. He left some work undone so that he can be revealed. The place will be suitable for his holy revelation. And that would lead me into the title of this presentation today is Traffic and Roadblocks on the Way. So where we want to go is we want to go from place Z to place A in that order, because place A we're calling Garden of Eden, what existed right after the creation of the world, before with man upon the world, and before the sin of the forbidden fruit, where everything was the maximum revelation of godliness and goodness. So we want to get back to there, and that's part of the reasons we're on this earth, to bring the world back to that existence, the revelation of God, with Mashiach guiding us, Messiah guiding us. And how we do that? By using God's handbook, among other things, a teaching guide, which is the Torah, where he gives us what we need to do, how to do it, to bring the world back to a holy state that it was. So that's our job. Jews have what we call 613 mitzvahs, plus some from the rabbis, and the Noachites have 7. So it's all under the umbrella of the Jewish teachings that we received at Mount Sinai. Going in more depth of that is a whole subject in itself. I will mention that the Lubavitcher Rebbe has emphasized very much that the teaching of the Noachite be provided, and expansion. And I'll give an example of that. This is a letter that Rebbe wrote to a military chaplain of some rank, and Rebbe had some expectations for him. And part of the letter is this. There is, of course, this is the Rebbe's words in English, So I might add a word or two. There is, although the military person did speak English, I'm sure that um, was probably authentic here. There is, of course, no need to emphasize to you the importance of promoting the seven Noahide commandments among the Gentiles in our day and age. It does not require much imagination to realize that, by way of example, had these seven divine commandments been observed and adhered to all the children of Noah, namely all the nations of the world, individually and collectively, there would have not have been any possibility in the natural order of things for the occurrence of such a thing like the Holocaust. That's an amazing statement. Remember, it said the natural order of things. So we have to do what we have to do according to nature. That's God's format for the running of the world. But still, um, he leaves open for any other God really intervention. But for we doing what we have to do is the Noahide. As I mentioned to you during our conversation, the dissemination of the seven Noahide laws is clearly stated in the Maimonides. That's Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, who wrote a full book with all the laws for the Jewish people. And he says it's a duty and obligation of Jews wherever and whenever possible to disseminate this information. And the Rebbe felt that in this era that it's possible because now there's freedom of religion, especially in this country and worldwide, there never was before. And the people could speak to others about other religion or other beliefs without fear of persecution or worse. So that's one reinforcement from the Rebbe. And there's another reinforcement sort of coming from a different direction. And is a letter directed to someone who was considering, it seems like from the tone of the letter, the person was asking the Rebbe about converting to Judaism. As you may know, that conversion to Judaism is possible. It's not easy, but it is possible. But it's not encouraged, and we as Jews are not encouraged to seek converts, contrary to most other religions. And therefore, even to discourage, I mean, every case is an individual case, of course. And again, as I said, conversion is possible. So from that, I'll give you a brief part of the letter that was written back to this person. Based on what you have wrote or written, why would you engage in a major mentally straining split and conflict with your parents and all your childhood friends, etc., to take upon yourself the yoke, the obligations of the Torah and mitzvahs, which would impact every single step of your life, something that you are completely not obligated to do in your current status. Instead, keep the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noah, the seven laws of the children of Noah, efficiently, and be kind to other people, and make complete amends with your parents. So among the Sheva Mitzvahs, you'll find the Rebbe emphasizes the kindness to other people, charity, deeds of goodness, okay, to other people, no matter who they might be. So here is another emphasis in case anybody is considering a conversion or the importance of the seven mitzvahs being involved with that. I think that's a pretty strong case presented by the Rebbe. Now, what I'm going to call this presentation is traffic and other obstacles from getting to point Z to A. It's enough to have the commands, but part of the package is to overcome obstacles to doing that, because Hashem, I mentioned before, has instituted called the other side of holiness. Uh, Evil people want, say, it's a creation. If you say it wasn't a creation, then that leads towards idol worship, because that means there's something outside of God. So we can't totally describe why God wanted evil, but one aspect of it is to give us credit for overcoming inclinations to do what we want to do, because there are many laws out there in the world, and unless you have a motivation to do some of them, it might be difficult at times. Maybe the wrong thing at the wrong time, or uncomfortable, or undesirable for what's going on. So God gave us the opportunity to show our what we're doing, not just for reward and making him happy, but to believe that he wants us to do the best thing for him, the best thing for ourselves and mankind. So there are obstacles to overcome, and this is nothing new. I mean, have you ever heard of nonsense, baloney, half truth, and many others, and different vernaculars that this world is, Rabbi has called it in some areas, the world of lies, the world of falseness. And some of it we generate ourselves, and there are mechanisms for it. So we're going to probe this a little bit, only to help you recognize when you're faced with these situations, and it's not casual, how to recognize it, classify it, and teach it to your children. And this is the beauty of Torah learning, that these types of subjects, which some people don't catch till later on in their lives, are presented to our youth, and hopefully they'll be able. It's put in a way, presented in a way that they can incorporate it in their youth and use it later. And this is an important part of teaching. That not only is this information presented, but the person remembers it and sees the likelihood for application. And we see our own growth, and sometimes we don't recognize situations much later and other challenges. So I'm going to tell you some of these, and they come from the Torah. Again, I mentioned that a lot of wisdom you find in the world, you've heard it from different places and other sources. And many times you'll hear it, or you'll find out the source is some Torah literature, and it's sometimes more concise or more directed. So anyway, I'll go on with that. First of all, is telling a lie requires some amount of truth. So to rephrase it is, if a person tells a total, complete lie with absolutely no truth, it's possible they're going to trip up, and that was not going to be accepted by the recipient. But if there's a small amount of truth in it, that may be enough to wedge itself into the door of possibilities for a person to consider it. I personally ran into circumstances where this was many years ago, where these, how would you say, revolutionary revelations by people were going to make sense of society and living, and had all sorts of seminars. And the doctor I was working with, who was a searching type person, said, and he was Jewish, but he wasn't religious at all. But he had the receptors up. So he went to this presentation, and I saw him later afterwards, and he said, it was very good. Some of the things I didn't really agree with, but a number of things I did. And therefore, I guess, since there was credibility with the ones I understood, that means there was probably credibility to the ones I didn't understand. Okay, that's a red flag. And what's the source of that? There's a story, if you may know, in the Torah literature, where when the Jews were in the desert, Sinai desert, and they're approaching to enter the land of Israel after 40 years in the desert, they requested to Moses to send spies to spy out the land, like any people would do with expecting a conflict, and to find out what they're going to expect to see. But God didn't command this to be done. He didn't think it was necessary. He told them to go, and that was enough. Moses complied, and they sent spies, and they came back after seeing giants, giant crops, giant everything, and they were quite intimidated by it. And they came back, and in their clever way, they said, "Really, it's an amazing land, land of milk and honey, but the people are so strong and big, we'll never be able to conquer it." All right, this is despite the fact that God brought them out of Egypt, they got them past the Red Sea, He sustained them in the desert with the clouds of glory, the manna, and yet they had enough doubt from those few words of truth that they were big people that they backed off, and it created a terrible uh, result. Actually, it was before they had the 40 years in the desert. And that the result was the consequence was they had to spend 40 years in the desert. They could have gone right into Eretz Yisrael, into the land of Canaan or land of Israel. So they just put a little, and the commentary says, here we learned that if you want to tell a lie, you need to tell some truth. Another circumstance, which is almost not the reverse, but uh, we'll call it reverse for lack of any other term, that I was once at in a situation where Jewish kids were getting pulled into, we'll call a cult. And we went to speak to them because they had a big convention. And in speaking to them, our past experience and things like that, where people were kind of glassy eyed and like dreamy and kind of programmed. And the people we were speaking to at this time were very level headed, uh, very clear presentation. As a group, they were extremely well behaved, cooperative. And it was like, what do they have? What do they have? And their meetings were conducted with a lot of um, courtesy and positive group dynamics. So one of our head rabbis heard of questioning this, and he pulled us aside and he said, as a group, was a group of young boys and students, he says there's a phrase in the Torah. It's called Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. It says, "Hear, O Israel, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one only." And that's not a number like number one. It's one means only. And he said, the last letter of the word one happens to produce the sound of a death. And he said, that letter looks a lot like a letter in the Hebrew alphabet. If you make just a little alteration in one of the corners of the letter, it'll sound like an R, like an R sound. So what the result would be is the word, according to the actual text, would be the Lord is one. But with the knocking off of a piece of a letter, very subtle, it changes to a sound which would mean others, meaning plurality. So that one little piece can distort that whole potent phrase. And devastated. There were things we saw there which were clearly, we'll say, idol worship, and clearly, how would you say, expectations beyond reality. So, despite the fact that everything looked so great, there were things that we didn't give enough credit to, is distorting the whole picture. Okay, going further. This is more a secular background. I remember listening to a radio program. It was in the 80s with a very um, famous talk show host. And I heard him say in the discussion was you can pervert a conversation or a debate just as easily as you can pervert a column of numbers, doctor up a column of numbers. I mean, it's a known thing. So, coupled with that, I saw a sign one time in the poster section of a major store. They had a whole, a rack of posters, and it was after I actually had a debate with somebody, which I lost. I didn't think I was wrong, but I couldn't win the debate, the guy. And after thinking about it, I was in the store and I was going through these posters, and the one poster said, "People who win arguments are not always right." So, so if you're ever talking to someone, if you see it's getting a little out of hand, ask them, are we discussing this because we want to arrive at the truth, or a proper plan with good results? Or are we here because we both want to win the argument, or one wants to win the argument? Now, coupled with that is something from the Torah again, that it says in one of the books of King Solomon, and it was transposed to practical use in the book of Tanya. And it basically said, when you're in a discussion with someone and you find yourself going around in circles, finally you might have to say, this is what it says: if you argue with a fool and choose to keep arguing with the fool, you will become a fool. So there is a time when it's advisable to back out of the discussion. You may look like he won, it may look like he won the argument, but to continue it is going to be just a deterioration of the whole matter. And so don't argue with a fool unless you become like the fool. There's a corollary to it, which is not traced necessarily directly to a Torah source. Uh, it says, and also if you hit the person with a stick, they're still not going to wake up. So as good as your arguments may be, it's useless. So don't be afraid to lose an argument, even though you may think you'll look like a loser initially. And now there's another Torah teaching that actually gives you some more tools for this, and you may find yourself in a discussion. I mean, this could be a discussion; doesn't have to be an argument, doesn't have to be a debate. And that is, and this is something I heard from a rabbi. I can't remember the context of the teaching, the Torah teaching was there, but I remember his summation that it says the exception to the rule does not disprove the rule. So if you hear a case well presented and some says, yeah, but what about this? What about these people? There's your red flag. That's the exception to the rule. It doesn't disprove the rule. I'm going to try to wrap this up. I don't want to keep going so late. That in a book called Pirkei Avos, which I mention all the time, Ethics of the Fathers, in chapter 5, they list 7 signs of a wise man, and then they said the opposite of this behavior, these 7 behaviors, denotes, well, for lack of a better word, people who are not so wise, a little stronger than that. And these are, how would you say, indicators, maybe again, red flags. You detect them, you have an idea that you may be in a debate or discussion where you're not going to get anywhere, or with an individual you're not going to be able to um, grow with. And these 7s are this. One is uh, a wise person doesn't speak before someone who's older than wiser than him. So, say you're in a group situation, a question comes up, and you have a person who's, we'll say, uh, older and wiser, for lack of other words, and someone should give that person a chance to reply to the question or the point that was brought up. The second one is a person doesn't interrupt the words of his fellow. So it's a good sign when you see a person will listen, let a person say what he has to say, and finish the point before they try to interject. The third one is a person doesn't rush to answer. And some people think it's a virtue that they speak right from the gut, so to say. We don't. We think a person should really use his intellect to think about the answer, appropriate answer, and listen and digest what was said. I mean, with reasonable amount of time. The fourth thing is if 2 points are made, you answer the point in the order they were presented. The first comes first, and the second comes second. The fourth one is to reply to the point, answer to the point, not switch off. I guess that's what we call the non sequiturs or go off on a tangent. But a person who's wise will stay with the point and answer to the point. Wise person will admit if he doesn't know. He'll say what he hasn't heard, or he doesn't know the answer, he'll say it. And it's actually a very good sign. There are people who don't want to admit they don't know anything or there's nothing that they don't know. And another one is that they will admit the truth. Something's right, they'll admit it. So we have these 7 flags that you're in the middle of a conversation, you get an idea whom you're dealing with. So with that in mind, I'm going to wish you all good, good weekend, good Shabbos, and have in mind that your value, whoever you are, whatever you're holding as far as Malachi or if you're Jewish, your Jewish background, that you're valuable, you have valuable attributes, and God should bless you all. Thank you so much.